Good morning. This is Sarah Crom, the Senior Transportation Planner with the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. Thank you all for joining us this morning. Before we get started, we do have some housekeeping items. We are going to be utilizing Mentimeter surveying, a Mentimeter surveying tool throughout the presentation. So we would like to, at this time, get us set up with the Mentimeter. So if you could please go to Menti.com. That's www.menti.com. You can use a tablet, cell phone, or your computer to access it, and then enter the code 6038578. And let me just pop on over to it. Oh, hold on. Apparently I have my settings open. And so that is menti.com. with the code 6038578. So we'd just like you to get it set up at this time by signing in by entering your zip code. So www.menti.com 6038578. So we will be asking some questions along the way and how using the tool for kind of a conversation piece. So please enter your zip code at this time. We'll just give it just a couple more minutes for people to get the Menti set up. Alrighty. We have another question that we'd like to ask as well right now, and that would be, what best describes your role in FDOT Partnership? So we want to get a gauge on, are you FDOT staff? Are you municipality staff from a consulting firm? Maybe you're a member of a governing board or a committee or a council, citizen, or other. And if you're an other, please feel free to type in the chat or question box on what that is. So it looks like we mostly have consulting staff today, followed by municipality, and FDOT staff. All right, I'm going to pop back over to our presentation. And so please keep that up and ready because we do have questions throughout the presentation. So before I turn it over to Georganna, we are just going to have one more housekeeping item, and that is, if you are unfamiliar with the GoToWebinar platform, please feel free to utilize the question box to ask questions throughout the presentation and or the comment box, and we will take those questions at appropriate times throughout the presentation. Also, the computer audio, if you are having audio issues, please, you can reach out to us, but this is really going to be on the control panel, the section that's going to be able to help you work out those issues. Finally, today's webinar is being recorded. It will be posted on our YouTube and in our social media. So if you would like to go back and watch it or otherwise, it is available. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to Georganna for the presentation. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sarah. Well, good morning and welcome, everyone. I'm Georganna Gillette. I'm the Executive Director of the Space Coast Transportation Planning Organization. And the Space Coast TPO serves as a forum for building consensus and facilitating discussions on how best to prioritize state and federal transportation dollars in our county. So the purpose of this webinar is to discuss best practices and resources to effectively provide valuable transportation partnerships between our local governments, the Space Coast TPO, and our FDOT partners. And I'd like to go ahead and introduce our special guests this morning. First, Ms. Tami Gillen is the City of Melbourne Assistant City Engineer and the designated responsible charge for local agency program projects. And over the past 13 years and under the city engineer's supervision, Ms. Gillen has worked very closely with the Space Coast TPO and FDOT in the development, design, and construction of LAP-funded projects, including the $8 million Hickory Complete Street project. And Ms. Gillen has a very strong working relationship with FDOT local programs and special projects, construction groups, and understands the importance of compliance with Federal Highway Administration guidelines in the implementation of federally funded projects. And we are also very fortunate to have the Florida Department of Transportation District 5 Secretary, Jared Perdue. And Mr. Perdue has devoted most of his career to FDOT. And not long after graduating from the Citadel with a bachelor's degree in civil engineering, he entered the professional engineer training program with FDOT District 3. And since completing that program, he has served in several different leadership roles, including the geotechnical engineer, the interim district maintenance engineer, district traffic operations engineer, district design engineer, and the district director of transportation development. And in 2019, Jared was appointed the District 5 interim secretary. So needless to say, he comes to District 5 with a lot of experience. And so we're very fortunate to have him on our team here. So Jared has a wife and 5 daughters. So welcome, Secretary Perdue. We are very pleased that you are here with us today. So in this hour, we'll discuss transportation planning and programming roles, advancing and completing local priority projects, and then local government partnerships. And the City of Melbourne will give some feedback on partnerships that they have accomplished over the past few years. And then we'll finally get into some questions and answers, which is always important. So on that note, let's get started. All right, the Florida Transportation Plan is a plan for all of Florida, and it provides direction to all organizations that are involved in the planning and managing of Florida's transportation system, including statewide, regional, and local partners. There are very specific goals and strategies driving Florida's transportation system. Safety and security for residents, visitors, and businesses is number one for all of us. The point here is that at the end of the day, we all want the exact same thing. We are the same coin, just different sides. Here in Central Florida, we have the Central Florida MPO Alliance, 6 MPO Forum, along with the Florida DOT. 4.6 million people. We have to think regionally. We have common issues. Brevard County has a robust transportation system that is largely driven by activities supporting Spaceport, Port Canaveral, and the Melbourne-Orlando International Airport. And we have several features here that are economic engines for the entire region. So we need good regional connectivity for tourism and goods movement. So we have very distinct yet complementary roles in Florida's transportation planning and programming processes. MPOs and local governments prioritize projects, while FDOT programs and budgets projects. So documenting that a project is a local need and priority should begin as early as possible. And it is important for a community's comprehensive plan and capital improvements plan to reflect its transportation needs and priorities. These plans address future land use, transportation, and capital improvements. The information from the various comprehensive plans is used collectively by the TPO in developing our long-range transportation plan, which contains a cost-feasible component. Transportation infrastructure needs and priorities are identified through planning initiatives such as local visioning efforts, comprehensive plans, long-range transportation plans, and mode-specific plans. But by partnering early and consistently, the DOT and our local governments can advance local transportation initiatives in a unified effort. It's continuous collaboration during the planning, programming, and project delivery process builds stronger partnerships that results in more efficient and effective implementation of projects to meet the local needs. So Florida statutes recognizes the role of local government in land use decisions. It requires that local government comprehensive plans provide the policy foundation for planning and land use decisions through the requirement of certain elements, including the capital improvement element, future land use element, transportation element, and the intergovernmental coordination element. These plans cover both a 5-year and a 10-year planning horizon. The Capital Improvements Plan is a key communication tool for a local government to ensure their projects are considered in regional and state funding plans. Must include a schedule of capital improvements, which includes any publicly funded projects. Projects are necessary to ensure that any adopted level of service standards are achieved and maintained for a 5-year period, and must be identified as either funded or unfunded and given a level of priority for funding. And the schedule must include transportation improvements included in the TPO's TIP, or Transportation Improvement Program, if applicable. And the schedule must also be coordinated with the TPO's long-range plan. And one of the key duties of the Space Coast TPO is to develop a long-range transportation plan and identify what improvements will be needed over the next 20 years. It's really the cornerstone for transportation investments for state and federal funding. The plan is really a culmination of the voices of our community. And as part of the long-range plan, a review of local jurisdiction policy was performed, really a plan synthesis to determine how the goals of the local agencies in Brevard County relate to the goals defined in our long-range plan. And so we have developed booklets for each local government that lists their cost-feasible projects as well as their needs. And our next step is to set on one-on-one meetings with each jurisdiction so that we can sit down at the table and have those discussions about how to better coordinate projects in their area for the future. You know, at the end of the day, you know, the TPO is really a liaison between our local governments and FDOT. We have an interlocal agreement with our local governments for the creation of the MPO, and we also have an ICAR agreement with our modal agencies. And together, we all work together to provide a multimodal transportation system. And so I think we all know that the best transportation plan is a great land use plan. And the TPO is very cognizant of the role land use plays in transportation projects. Policies linking transportation and land use help guide the development of Brevard County's cities and towns to better facilitate bicycle, pedestrian, and transit mobility. Planning and implementation of transit-oriented development is one specific strategy to link transportation and land use. We encourage and support all of our municipalities to implement the findings of the ADA bus stop assessment that we conducted last year. Prioritize funding for pedestrian and bicycle projects in designated mixed-use pedestrian-friendly areas or near high trip generators like schools, senior housing, etc. Complete the street. You know, we support projects that improve access to tourist destinations. So it's important that we work with our modal agencies to consider their master plans as well. And of course, FDOT has the context classification of a roadway together with its transportation characteristics will provide information about who the users are along the roadway, the regional and local travel demand, and the challenges and opportunities of each roadway user. So land use decisions directly impact the transportation system and facilities in the region. Land use generates vehicle trips, leading to traffic congestion and costly, expansive roadway capacity improvements. So managing growth of our communities and creating a variety of transportation options is critical. Enhancing public transportation service, pedestrian and bicycle safety, improves network connectivity. So single entry subdivision and isolated commercial projects exacerbate traffic problems, but providing multiple travel paths and travel modes when land is developed will help tremendously. So many different people could be champions for linking transportation and land use, and you know, we're really in this together, and we all have a role. And everyone from TPO staff to city and county staff, our local elected officials, planning boards, our citizens and our interest groups, and of course our developers as well. Again, we are in this together. So on that note, I think we have a Menti question first. We have a couple Menti questions.
Yep. So if you have not already logged into Menti, it's menti.com. You can use a cell phone, tablet, or your computer. And the code is 60385782. And we have a couple of Menti questions to follow up on the discussion that Georganna was just having. So, how can you in your job work to foster partnerships to integrate transportation and land use decisions? What are some of the activities that you think that you could help with within your roles to connect transportation and land use?
We're not getting any bites on that one, are we?
Well, they have to type it out, so. So good communication, attend neighboring communities, trails, and greenways committee meetings, lots of communication. So partnership and communication, open dialogues, compelling arguments on the value of trying them together. So having good conversation about partnerships, establish and sustain relationships, assist with data, communication.
Yeah, those are all really, really good.
Listening, creative solutions. And once again, Menti, if you are not in it yet, it is menti.com. The code is 60385782, and it is posted in the chat. Laura, can you send it again through the chat?
Sure.
Thank you. Educate our residents on how transportation and multimodal networks are planned, funded, and executed. These are all great responses. All right, so now we're moving into, so those are all great positive things that we can do to work together, but what are some of the barriers that you feel are the largest for you for developing the partnerships and moving projects forward? Is it staffing resources? Is it funding? And you can pick up to 3. Political will, communication. We just saw lots about communication. Training, perhaps you or your staff aren't sure how and are lacking in training. Is it your leadership, or is it something else? And please feel free, if you do choose the other to share in the chat or question box on what that other is. So what barriers do you feel are largest for you when trying to develop partnerships and complete projects? We'll just give it a couple more minutes. Currently, it looks like political will is by far the largest, followed by funding, communication, and staffing resources.
All right.
All right. Well, thank you for everyone who participated. And oh, we got a couple more in the Menti. And this will stay open as we continue on in the presentation.
All right. So funding and political will look to be kind of bubbling up to the very top, which are both very challenging. So on that note, Secretary Perdue, I would love to get your thoughts, feedback on what was just presented, and what is the perspective of the department concerning that particular topic.
Yeah, thank you, Georganna, and really happy to be here. Thank you for inviting me. It's always an honor to get to work with you and the TPO and all the local governments. A couple of, you mentioned, there's a lot of plans, there's a lot of documents that are produced, there's a lot of effort that goes into planning, but there's a lot of key words you mentioned in your presentation. Things like comprehensive and community and long range, and one of the things I wanted to highlight, and a lot of times I think it's missed when we talk about transportation. And if you go back to the history of Florida, and you go back to the early 1900s and think about when we went from horse and buggy to cars, and as we got through the mid 1900s, having so much territory to cover, not being very densely populated, transportation was really mostly about cars, right? and building roads. And so there was kind of like a proliferation of roads, and the focus was really on how to move cars from point A to point B. As the nation has grown, as the state of Florida has grown, and as we've progressed, things have changed drastically. And it's no longer about moving cars. It's about people. It's about moving people. And there are so many different ways to do that. Airplanes, boats, trains, bicycles, walking, cars are one of them, and we're coming into the age of technology. It's going to change things even more, where you're going to have autonomous vehicles of all different shapes and sizes. And so, one of the things that I want to highlight, and I think, Georganna, that you really touched on some of this, is that transportation has really become a people business. It's all about people. It's all about relationships. It's all about partnerships. And there's nothing more powerful in the transportation world than when a community of people and a region of people speak with one voice. That's when things really start to happen. That's when we can really begin to benefit this place that we live in. And so, when you start to put all the pieces together, transportation becomes even more than just movement of people. It becomes about the quality of life and the sense of place, and people actually enjoying where they are and what they're doing, and all these things kind of work together. And so as we're kind of moving into the future, one of the really important roles of the TPO and the local governments involved in the TPO is speaking with this one voice and building this momentum, so that ultimately 15 years down the road, we're building transportation projects and infrastructure that are focused on people, and not just a mode like moving cars. It's focused on what the community wants, what the community needs when it comes to the economy, the individuals that live there, the quality of life in that community, and really, kind of that transformative of thought process. So there's a lot of value in the things you just discussed in your presentation. And I think that, the one thing that I would take away or want to highlight there is that there's nothing more important than the partnerships and the relationships that we form when we're working through all of these different components of transportation. It is truly the way that we get things done. And so you can't spend too much time or energy on a relationship. There's no way. It's the absolute most important part of our business, and it brings a tremendous amount of value. So thank you for your comments. I hope that kind of summarizes where we are as an agency, and I'm looking forward to the future.
Absolutely. Thank you very much. That was very insightful. And what I neglected to say is that, how transportation is now a people business. Public engagement, that takes place throughout the entire process, and you can never, have too much of that, and that is extremely important. And sometimes, it can be navigating that can be tough, and so we have to be partners and be in this together. And so that was very insightful. Thank you very much for that. All right, so let's roll into the next section. So if we're talking about partnerships, it's going to be hard for me not to at least touch briefly on the money, because that is an important part of the conversation. And of course, to develop a comprehensive, safe, efficient, connected, and reliable transportation system, it requires funding from a variety of sources: state, federal, local, and the private sector. For the State Transportation Trust Fund, I think most of us do understand that, DOT has three main funding sources, and it's projected by the Revenue Estimating Conference, which is a group of economists in Tallahassee that forecasts gas tax revenues, motor vehicle license fees, and so on. But we rely heavily on the State Transportation Trust Fund, and 2/3 of the revenue comes from fuel tax. There is some from the rental car surcharge and some from dock stamps, but most of the funding comes from taxes on motor fuel. And the challenge at the state level is that alternative fuel vehicles and electric vehicles will continue to have an impact. In 2020, Florida had more than 60,000 registered electric vehicles. The latest study by FDOT showed they will impact the Transportation Trust Fund by 2025, and by 2040, and this is a very aggressive forecast, but it does show a 30% reduction in gas tax revenue, which is very significant. 25% or so of the funding is made up of federal funds, which is a federal apportionment and obligating authority. So every time you get a gallon of gas, you get 18.5 cents back from the federal government in fuel tax. It's not indexed for inflation. The federal funding comes from pennies per gallon fuel tax, which has not been adjusted since 1993. And I always say Seinfeld and Home Improvement were the two top television shows in 1993, just to put that into perspective. We are selling less gas per vehicle due to increasing fuel efficiency and the electric vehicles. The local option taxes are added to an area's tax base for local infrastructure. And in the Central Florida area, 4 of the counties have fully leveraged their local option fuel tax. Orange and Brevard have not leveraged any of their local option taxes. There is 6 cents not being levied. And of course, this is a local decision. Visitors pay gas tax in Brevard when they fill up, as well as residents and neighboring counties who drive here to work and play. This is a user fee, and we should think about the visitor contribution, the funding that we are losing out on to try and fund some of our local transportation projects. And just want to mention in the Space Coast TPO's Transportation Improvement Program between fiscal years 21 through 25, we have over $964 million in the DOT work program coming into Brevard County, and that's a lot of money. You know, each project is in different stages of development, but it's for all modes of transportation, highway and bridge, our spaceports and seaports, which also provides a local match for that state funding, which is extremely valuable. All of this funding is coming into Brevard County, but believe it or not, we still need more. It's still not enough to answer the needs in our transportation system. And sometimes it can be a long road to implementation. Project development and delivery process includes several phases, and the level of effort for each phase really does vary based on, you know, the individual project. Local governments should really approach FDOT as early as possible to partner and complete transportation infrastructure projects, because understanding where a project may enter the development and delivery process is helpful in advancing the project efficiently. And of course, supporting information like a documented public engagement and having elected board support or a feasibility study, it really does help communicate readiness, not only to DOT, but to the TPO as well. And, you know, you should always coordinate with the TPO to ensure projects are included on the TPO's list of priority projects. Did you know that a developer or a local government can choose to contribute or to fully fund a project phase? And you may ask, why would I do that? Well, the answer would be so that we could move the project forward a lot sooner. Otherwise, you know, the project may sit there and it may be a while before we can come up with the appropriate funding to move that project forward. So the local agency program provides local governments with federal funds to develop, design, and construct transportation facilities. And FDOT administers these funds on behalf of Federal Highway, and LAP is really a delivery method, not a fund type, meaning the FDOT can manage several types of funds through this program. And Tami's going to touch on the LAP program in a lot more detail and talk about some of the successes that they have had at the City of Melbourne. But it is important for a local government to work with a TPO to identify those prioritized projects that best fit the federal delivery method. Federal funds are great, but it's not a good fit for all projects. And typically it could cost a lot more and it may take longer. So having those conversations with the TPO will be extremely important. So what helps your community's project application really stand out? Prioritize shovel-ready projects. I think that is a big one. Be strategic in coordinating priority projects for local funding versus FDOT funding. Proactively work with the TPO and the DOT to strategically identify state and federal sources. It's also important to have local funds available to match various grant reimbursements. The County Incentive Grant Program and the Transportation Regional Incentive Grant Program requires a 50% match. It's an opportunity that if the department has the funding available, we could get a project phase funded, but you have to have a match. And of course, you know, USDOT grants, which are much larger grant applications, they require an 80% match, a 20% match to match the 80% federal funding. So these are just some of the things that really does help your application stand out. So switching gears just a little bit, resurfacing, restoration, and rehabilitation, which we affectionately call the 3R. When a local government is contacted by DOT that a resurfacing of a roadway within your jurisdiction is going to take place, take note and engage your staff and reach out to the TPO. I will say FDOT District 5 has been very proactive over the last several years and reaches out to the TPO and the local government very early on in pre-scoping, like a pre-design process. And they're asking for feedback. They're wanting to know, do you have any drainage issues? Is there safety improvements? What is the vision of this roadway in your community? And this is a big partnership opportunity. And you know, we can all see how we can build better roads while maintaining them at the same time. And so I think we should all be taking advantage of this partnership opportunity. And I just want to mention one example, and that is State Road 520. This is a great example of a 3R project that is much more than a 3R project. And it was accomplished by partnership between the City of Cocoa, the DOT, and the TPO. State Road 520 runs east-west in the Cocoa Village bifurcated downtown area. And it began in 2016-2017, where we asked DOT to conduct a feasibility study for the corridor. And they did, and we had a tremendous amount of visioning, public outreach, and it is a very, as you can see, an auto-centric corridor, but now it will be designed as a complete street, curb ramps, patterned crosswalks, a lane reduction, buffered bicycle lanes, the potential for landscaping. And, you know, there are times where a local government or the TPO may need to supplement the funding of a 3R project. And in this case, the TPO contributed, I think, roughly around 1.7 million. But we are going to have a valuable corridor for the community. And so this is just a very important mechanism to implement projects that are going to benefit your community. And then, you know, I could go on and on with a lot more examples of partnerships between DOT and our local governments. There's several complete streets here. Also, you know, just with public outreach for education of our Vision Zero action plan. You know, we would love to have each city adopt their own Vision Zero action plan. Because ultimately, you know, we would love to see that culture shift where we would have Vision Zero cities, and so we're going to continue to work to build, you know, important sidewalk projects, complete streets, and education of the public to try and drive down, you know, pedestrian fatalities and serious injuries. All right, and so that takes us to our next Mentimeter question before we hear from Secretary Perdue.
All right, let me hop on over. So, and this is our last Mentimeter question of the presentation. How can the Space Coast TPO, or if you aren't in the area that of the Space Coast TPO, your TPO or MPO, better help agencies work together to complete local priority projects? So how can TPOs and MPOs better help agencies work together to complete local priority projects? And this is another typing in, so it might take a couple minutes. Or a couple seconds. Demonstrate project support. Excellent thought, an idea. Find creative funding sources. So how can TPOs and MPOs better help agencies work together to complete local priority projects, explaining the process to staff level folks and to their leadership, and then scheduling, here I'll pull this one up bigger, then scheduling follow-up discussions to see what actions they have taken. I love accountability. So coordination meetings, and I definitely am a firm believer of action items and coming out of meetings. Develop a standard method for ranking projects. I could do a whole hour presentation on that one, Georganna.
Yes, you can.
Communication/outreach to local municipalities, maintaining continuous proactive relationships, consensus from leadership on vision and the resources to implement, top down. Excellent point. Help agencies with public education and outreach. Space Coast TPO does a good job, but local agencies don't do it as well. All right, so this is going to stay open where you can continue to put in your comments, but I am going to pop back over to the presentation because I know that we still have a lot to cover.
Well, very good. Those are excellent comments, and after this is over, we're going to be going through them and looking for ways to improve on our end. So Secretary Perdue, I will turn it over to you.
Thank you, Georganna. And when I see that headshot of myself, it always scares me because I've got that deer in the headlights look. I think that might have been after my first few days as a district secretary. So. But this topic you just covered was, you made a lot of really good points, Georganna, and it's a very meaty conversation. There's a few things that I kind of wanted to touch on. One, you started out talking about revenues. That's something that that local communities, the transportation industry, and really every sector of the economy really needs to start thinking about is transportation. I mean, transportation is the backbone of everything that we do. And you know, you mentioned that by 2025, the proliferation of electric and fuel efficient vehicles is going to start impacting FDOT's revenue source because it is primarily based on the gas tax. And there's projections that even show towards the end of this decade that the revenue is actually going to peak from the gas tax. And you know, it's that curve. It's, you know, it's always going up, and it's going to start to peak. And then, you know, as more electric vehicles and fuel efficiency enters the market, you know, those revenues are going to be really impacted because it is a direct relationship to fuel consumption right now. And so that's a challenge. A lot of states across the nation are beginning to have those conversations. There's national discussions about, hey, you know, what are we going to do about this revenue challenge that we're faced with? It's definitely a topic that needs to be researched and discussed, and a plan needs to be developed for the future. It's important. And one of the reasons it's important, which that's kind of a segue into the next point I wanted to kind of highlight, is that, you know, one of the first things you learn is when you start researching economics, whether you learn in school or you kind of are self-educated, one of the first things you learn is that resources are always scarce. So no matter what you're trying to do in any sector of the economy, I mean, here we're focused on transportation, you're always starting out, your starting place is scarce resources. You never have enough to do everything that you need to do. So that in and of itself creates a pretty big challenge. And so, you know, how do we meet all the needs with scarce resources? Resources are scarce when it comes to funding. Resources are scarce when it comes to labor. Resources are scarce when it comes to supplies, materials. And so, you know, how do we meet all the needs when resources are scarce? That's where the partnership and relationship part of this business comes back into play, because, you know, we're planning, especially at the TPO level, we're planning for the future, and to have communities speaking with one voice, and also everybody bringing their respective resources to the table to try to move these priorities forward that communities have got together and decided, you know what, this is a priority for our region, this is a priority for our community. When everybody gets behind that and brings their respective resources, some entities' resources are greater than others, but everything matters, everything counts. And so when these partners all work together and bring these respective resources to the table, then we can start moving these priorities forward. And you know, there's a lot of programs out there that you mentioned that require matches, and you know, those programs were set up years ago. And you know, my philosophy has kind of adapted over the years, where it's really not as much about a required match, but more about, you know, if it's just left to one entity to solve the problem, there's never going to be enough resources to do everything that needs to be done. And so that match is actually a very valuable tool for local governments to leverage the other resources that are out there and move a priority forward. So it's a very important topic, and really it's when you're trying to garner and pull resources together, it's a very competitive environment no matter what sector of the economy you're in. So when all these respective resources are kind of put together and being delivered to a common goal or a common initiative that communities are behind, it really helps things move faster. And you showed a very neat chart about the phases of a project and the timelines. And if you actually add up all of those respective phases, you know, you quickly see that delivering a project can take anywhere from 12 to 15 years. Now, when communities begin to speak with one voice, and this is something that's very important that I really like to talk about, when communities band together, state, local, federal, and begin to speak with one voice, and you get a lot of momentum, all of a sudden, a lot of those resources flow to those phases. You can begin to overlap them, you can condense, and then all of the valuable work that's being done at the TPO, you can actually see a project go from conception to delivery within, you know, 5 or 6 years. And that's something that I think is really important to realize, is that if a TPO has really developed that strength of community and that strength of purpose, and everybody kind of moving in the same direction, you can begin to see things get done faster and faster and faster because resources flow to it. So it's great, a great topic. That's kind of some philosophical thoughts. You mentioned the 3R program. What a tremendous opportunity to do community-oriented projects. It's a huge opportunity. We touch every state road with a resurfacing, you know, in the average of every 15 years. So, you know, if a community misses the opportunity to understand and have a vision for what it wants to look like and what it wants this facility going through, you know, to feel like and look like, and really agree with its sense of place, you know, 3R is a great opportunity to do that. And if it's missed, it could be another 15, 18 years before that opportunity comes up again. So it's a tremendous opportunity for partnering, for relationships to really bring additional value. And at FDOT, I mean, we fully embrace complete streets and context-sensitive design, and we're going through this transformative thought process right now with how we deliver projects and the way we make decisions and the things we incorporate into even the most simple of resurfacing projects. So that's a great opportunity. I'm really glad you mentioned that. And with that, I will turn it back to you.
Thank you very much. I appreciate those comments, and it really it helps us to want to do better and look for as many opportunities as possible. And this has kind of spurred a lot of thoughts on ways that we can, you know, be more strategic with in working with our local governments and DOT. So thank you. Tami, we're going to move into your section. We're running a little long, but you have some really good information on the City of Melbourne's experiences. So I want to kick it to you. And
all right, I am going to, Tami, I'm about to make you the presenter.
All right, can you hear me?
Yes.
All right, great. All right, let's make sure I got the PowerPoint up here.
You should be able to share your screen. Perfect,
all right.
we see it.
Okay, great. Just quickly, thank you so much for Georganna for having me today. I'm such a privilege to join you and Secretary Perdue. Oh, hold on a second. Let me make sure. Here we go. Okay. Oh, what am I doing here? Okay, begin. Ooh. For some reason, why is there two? All right. I am having, oh, here we go. Okay, that's why. All right, sorry about that, a little technical difficulty, but thank you so much for having me today. I wanted to share the local perspective. Georganna was kind enough to allow me to put a little presentation together for you all today. And one of the things that I wanted to prepare for the agenda that's been very helpful for us is to really understand the oversight and stewardship agreement between Federal Highway and DOT. So a couple of 5-part agenda here, the local agency certification process. We'd like to also discuss real briefly the staff training for lab projects that we undergo, the federal compliance and agency commitments, the programming process, and some examples of successfully completed projects. So the Stewardship and Oversight Agreement, as Georganna mentioned, the LAP is the department's primary delivery mechanism for local agency projects to develop, design, and construct transportation facilities with federal aid funds. And DOT is the steward of federal aid funds and is responsible for the oversight of federally funded projects on behalf of Federal Highway. So we as local agencies must be certified to deliver these projects. So this relationship here is invaluable to understand so that we see how the funding is funneled through the TPO as our liaison, and then also between the city directly with DOT for review of plans and ensuring that we are following the specifications and standards that are required and the compliance requirements through as a federalized project. So the certification process, the City of Melbourne is project-specific LAP certified. What that means is that we have the limited capacity, as most agencies do, in doing LAP projects. So DOT's definition is a successful administration of up to 3 federal aid projects within a 3-year period. We have to demonstrate that we have the staff with the minimum qualifications to administer these projects. And also, we must meet the performance expectations as outlined in the district's LAP guidelines and the LAP manual. This is an example of our organizational chart. The highlighted items are our LAP staff that help us, starting with the deputy city manager, who oversees the city engineer, and the city engineer oversees the responsible charge. You can see over here, and also we have currently an unfilled project manager position, but we also have a LAP RCS oversight staff. He's also our engineering tech. All of these positions are positions that do LAP, but they also do their primary work as well. And then, of course, our grants reimbursement person over here in the city manager's office who makes sure that we get our refunds or reimbursements back into the city coffer. So part 2 is the training, very important component of being able to do lab projects. It's mandatory and continuous. We are constantly undergoing trainings via webinars or computer-based training and in-person meetings for the various lab projects. And one of the most important is the subrecipient compliant assessment tool. It is an 8-hour training for the responsible charge, but also the Title VI coordinator and the ADA coordinator. It is a process to get your certification through Tallahassee. Actually, they look and review to make sure that you are meeting all those requirements, and they do help you out. It's been a journey, and I can share with you that it does take a little time. As Georganna mentioned, it's been 13 years, and I think we've got it to where we need to be as an agency. But you can see that there are many hours of training for the various job classifications. So the part 3 I wanted to share with you today was the federal compliance and agency commitments. It is critical for the successful delivery of lab projects to have that local commitment and participation. And the guidelines and DOTs for lab is that the agency shall maintain the staff commitments identified at the onset of each project. And we have to inform the district of any changes immediately. And then also we must have a point of contact for and redundancy of project management and coverage, as well as a succession planning in order to ensure continuity of lab administration. So in addition, they require us to have a task team, and it's comprised of the district and agency participants, and we work very closely with local programs during the design and programming of some of these projects, and also the special projects construction office that oversees our construction phase of our projects. We have regular quarterly meetings between us and the district for the management and technical aspects of each project. So continuing with part 3, the agency attendance, commitment, and representation is required and maintained throughout every phase of the project. And there's a performance expectation that the district requires of us. And it answers the question, how well did the agency maintain commitment and representation? How well did we establish and maintain lockdown schedules? How well did it complete and maintain project schedules? And how well did we adhere to the milestones, the due dates, and the local commitments? And finally, how well did we complete the production development, the actual design and construction plans? So those are all graded. And next part is the programming phase. So this phase is actually, it's got a pre-programming phase, which must be completed and accepted by the district. So step 1 is to have a thorough project application. The second step is to anticipate a project schedule for all phases of the project. Sometimes it's very tough to do when you don't have an actual design completed. We usually get help from various resources for that phase. Step 3 is develop a cost estimate for all phases of the project. And then step 4, ensure you have the project identified on the Space Coast TPO priority list. And then we move over into the programming phase, which has minimum thresholds for projects. You can see a design and construction phase, minimum thresholds, and there's no minimum threshold for CEI. Once you're in the design phase, you have your completion benchmarks that you must meet, and that is also typically over, depending on the complexity of the project, 1 to 2 year phase. And then finally, the construction phase, which DOT refers to as the pass the torch into construction and CEI. And this is a list of some of the projects that we undertook or have are in progress. Since the American Recovery and Reinvestment Act, ARA, of 2009, you can see our stimulus projects were some of our first federally funded projects. And we graduated slowly into SRTS projects, which are Safe Routes to School projects for design and construction. And then we started hearing a lot of talk about complete streets projects. And as Georganna and Secretary Perdue mentioned, those, we started really looking at things in a very transformative way of repurposing that right away so we could accommodate all the users of the road. So that was very revolutionary here in 2015 or so. And then, of course, we're always trying to do sidewalk safety projects, trail projects, and more SRTS projects. So these are some of the examples of the projects that we've worked on. This is, some of you may know, this area of town is the where the Florida Tech's campus is, just south of 192 and Babcock Street is over here. And the yellow that you see is sidewalk construction, and the red are the ADA compliant curb ramps. This was actually a phase 2 of our University Park SRTS project. We didn't have enough back in 2013 to fund both phases, so we fortunately were the TPO was gracious enough to grant us some additional funding, and we were able to complete this project last month, as a matter of fact. And here's some before and after pictures. Here you see where the creek crosses. There was a constraint for bicyclists and pedestrians. There's really hardly any room back here, but somehow our designers figured out a way to squeeze in a sidewalk and also a guide rail for drop off. And you can see our residents are already starting to enjoy it. Our very own Laura Carter actually has family members that say that they're already enjoying these sidewalks very much. Also, University Park Elementary School children use this route as well. And here's another picture of the project where you can see dense trees and canopies that were all preserved with the introduction of some curb and 6-foot flush to curb sidewalks. You can see that it looks much different and provides that nice continuity for pedestrians. And lastly here, where there was no sidewalk, we now have a nice bright school crossing. And of course, we know that this also is so valuable for the community and people that want to get outside and walk and use our sidewalks. And lastly, Melbourne Avenue was also part of the sidewalk project, and you can see that we were once again very cognizant of our mature trees, and we were able to go around, and now we have a nice pedestrian access. And incidentally, this sidewalk does connect to Babcock Street, which then ties you directly into the downtown through the Melbourne Avenue corridor. And then as I mentioned earlier, we started hearing a lot of buzz about complete streets, and the TPO actually initiated a feasibility study in 2014, 2015, and it really changed everything for us. It was very exciting to be able to undergo this type of project in the community, and it really helped us to look at things a little differently moving forward. So in 2015, the city selected a design consulting using the professional service unit checklist for our contract development. And that cost was approximately $920, of which about half was federal dollars, and infrastructure engineers helped us with the design. And then in 2018, the city hired a contractor using the lab construction checklist for contract development. And of course, Lisa Boucher and all the folks at local programs helped us with that development. And we were able to construct the project for $8 million, of which 7.2, a nice chunk, almost all was federally eligible for reimbursement. The other portion that was not was the city's responsibility, the reuse water line that was installed, that was new, that we wanted to put in with the project. And the other nice thing about this project was that we did have a wonderful cooperation from the hospital, who actually donated some right-of-way for us. And the CEI was funded by the city for $800,000. Eisman and Russo did that for us. And so you can see, when all said and done, the city's investment was about $2 million, and we got over an $8 million project when all was said and done. So it's about a quarter of the total investment. So for Hickory Street, what our designers did and the planners is look at how we could transform this hospital district, which is Holmes Regional Medical Center. We had a lot of pedestrians that would go back and forth, a lot of visitors to the hospital, and not the most optimum condition. We had the Civic Center in this area, green area, with some museums and parks. And really it's just, again, it was an opportunity here in the residential area, in the commercial district. It was an opportunity to tie it all in together, and of course, into the downtown, to make it one seamless, complete street. So here's some examples of our project. The goals, of course, as I mentioned, was to enhance pedestrian bicycle safety, and introducing that complete streets concept with the 4 various districts, implementing traffic calming to improve vehicular, pedestrian, and bicycle circulation, and also develop some innovative techniques for environmental sustainability, and of course, safety for all modes of transportation, including transit. And the design elements included the bicycle lanes. We had sharrows in here, improved sidewalks, transit facilities, a double roundabout, upgraded lighting, raised table pedestrian crossing, and of course, landscaping, hardscaping. And then we had upgraded utilities in this area, water lines and reuse lines. Some more examples. Here are some of the sharrows. And this is over in front of the Heart Center. Here you can see that in front of Wells Park, already less than before we even had a chance to cut the ribbon, the folks were already using the project. So with that, we have a little video to share with you all that our consultant infrastructure engineers developed, and I will turn it over to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Tami. Give me a second to.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry.
Secretary Perdue, I do want to be sensitive to everyone's time. I know we're 9 minutes over, so if you need to take off prior to this little 3-minute video, please feel free to do that. I also want to say that we have been getting some questions in. Laura has been answering those questions. One of the questions we did receive, and this is a very good point that fits into Tami's point or her presentation, is that small towns don't have staff for LAP, and how do they participate? And so that is a challenge. You know, of course, the municipalities, the smaller ones, can reach out to a LAP certified city project specific or the county. But unfortunately, they're so busy implementing their own projects, they typically don't have the resources to assist. And so it is a challenge. And you know, Tami, one of the things we've talked about is, you know, it can be very intimidating to do a LAP project, but perhaps, you know, in working with Lisa, there is an opportunity for a smaller city to perhaps work and implement a LAP project. So Secretary Perdue, do you have any thoughts on that before you take off? But I know that that is one of the challenges, is the smaller cities that just is very much having a challenge becoming LAP certified, because you do have to have the staffing resources and you know, and the financial resources as well.
It is definitely a challenge, Georganna, and it's a great point. And it's a code that I don't think the industry has really cracked yet. I mean, because you know there's a lot of requirements that go along with federal funding, and it does make it a challenge. And you know, I know there's a lot of opportunities that smaller cities and towns who, you know, have staffing struggles, they feel like they've missed out on those opportunities because they can't become LAP certified. And so, you know, I think it's something that we certainly need to talk about, because you know, you don't want to see communities miss out on opportunities to do some of the stuff like Tami just showed, which that was a great presentation, Tami. Thank you for that.
Yeah,
Thank you.
and Tami, that was really good, and I think it was very helpful to our local governments. So I just want to say thank you, you know, Tami and Secretary Perdue. Thank you for your thoughts and your feedback and being a part of this presentation on partnerships with DOT, and we all have to look for ways that we can work together. So on that note, do you want to end, Sarah, by sending by playing the little 3-minute video so everyone can see that? And if you have any questions, please feel free to email me. You can call me here, and we would be more than happy to chat, especially our local governments who, you know, have any questions concerning LAP or ways how we can work together. And I'm looking forward to kind of mulling through all of those comments and seeing how we can, you know, ways that we can be more strategic. All right. So Sarah, we'll let you play the little video.
All righty, give me just 1 second while I get it pulled up.
We're here today with Contour Engineers in Melbourne, Florida, where our Winter Springs design team has performed enhancements to Hickory Street. Let's take a look at some of the highlights of these enhancements.
Hello, I'm standing at the intersection of P Avenue, the junction between the City Library and Our Lady of Lourdes Catholic Church. One of the features that we want to do with our project is promote safety for the pedestrians. We did that by elevating the crosswalks to provide a little more visibility for those pedestrians.
One of the key aspects of this project is to really focus on blending the roadway elements with the fabric of the community and the surrounding areas. Most notably, and probably the center and focal point of this section of the roadway, is this Festival Street area that blends two parks together. And we utilized innovative technologies such as the paved drain and an innovative typical section to really enhance the ability and walkable and connectivity of this roadway by eliminating obstructions that are typically found with an urban roadway system.
One of the key challenges within the project was the need to maintain traffic open at all times due to the nature of emergency response facilities that we have in the area. As you can see behind me, Fire Station number 74 for the City of Melbourne, as well as the Holmes Regional Medical Center and other medical facilities north of the project. The single most signature feature of this project is the development of a double roundabout system at the entrance of the hospital campus. This double roundabout system reduces delay, improving capacity, calming traffic, and enhancing as well the safety for all modes of transportation.
In order to accommodate all users of the roadway, we coordinate with Space Coast Area Transit to upgrade all the bus stops along the corridor.
As important as it is to move traffic throughout the corridor, it was equally important to maintain sustainability. To do this, we utilized rain gardens, also known as bioswales, which incorporated native vegetation to be able to clean up the stormwater as it comes off the roadway.
Excellent video. Love it. And we always look for ways to, you know, kind of get our complete street projects out there. We've talked about doing before and after analysis. So, you know, we can kind of gauge the public's input, economics, and the value into the neighborhood. But this is just one of the largest complete street projects that we've been involved with. And so thank you, Tami, and your staff for the vision for this project. And I think the community just absolutely loves it. All right, so with that, I know the secretary had another meeting. Thank you guys so much. We do have our next Transportation Thursday webinar series. Is Mr. Stephen Bostel, who is our Transportation Program Manager, is going to talk about intelligent transportation systems on August the 26th, 10 to 11 a.m. So that'll be exciting as well. So again, you have a wonderful day. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you, Georganna. Thank you.
Thank you.